Just before 5:30 Monday night, the West Palm Beach Police Department received a call from a worker at one of the Solid Waste Authority's plants in the western part of our city. In the tipping floor, which is inside where the garbage trucks dump their loads when they come into the renewable energy facility, workers there discovered what they thought were human remains. I don't have information. We're not releasing the extent or type of human remains, but detectives believe these were human remains of an infant. As far as the number of remains recovered and what body parts, we're not releasing that at this time. The medical examiner did take the remains for further examination. Until about midnight Monday night, detectives, crime scene investigators, and officers were pouring through mounds of garbage with rakes, with tools, and by hand looking for additional remains. As of midnight, no other remains were recovered other than the remains that the workers had located. So what we have is an open and active investigation. Detectives are continuing the investigation by looking at surveillance video to track the movement of trucks that were coming in. Just so you know, the tipping floor is the inside portion where the garbage trucks come in to the renewable energy facility. They dump their loads there. The load was apparently cleared away, and the body parts that were found by that worker remained on the floor. That stunned worker alerted people at the facility. They called 911, and that's where we are at this point. I know some of you got emails from tips.
So are these partial remains, or how complete of the remains of the infant were you able to recover?
Well, first let me reiterate that detectives believe that the remains that were recovered belong to an infant. As far as exact age and type of body parts, they're not releasing that, and this is also pending the examination by the medical examiner's office. So that is something that's ongoing. Detectives are continuing the investigation by looking at surveillance video to track the movement of trucks coming in to see if they can identify what truck could have brought these remains in. And from there, the investigation will work backwards into what was that truck's route and working that way. Simultaneously, we also have other investigative means, for example, DNA, genealogy, things like that, that can be utilized, and detectives are looking at all possible means to identify who the remains belong to.
Is there any way to tell how long the remains were there, or just based on the truck movement, when that truck dumped off the remains?
Detectives have not given me a timeline, but it appears that the remains were discovered right before 5:30 when the worker called and was transferred to our 911 emergency communications center.
This is obviously probably part of the investigation, but with the regions that these trucks cover, have you been able to pinpoint an area within West Palm Beach where you think it may have come from?
That is something that detectives are looking at by looking at surveillance video, tracking the truck's movements and their routes. Hopefully they'll be able to establish where the remains came from. So it's just working an investigation that we often do from now to the previous. So we're working this investigation we're working the investigation at that process.
Early on you said parts.
Yep.
And you said remains.
Yep.
Is this a intact body?
Body parts. We're just going to say body parts that are human remains that appear to be those of an infant. So if anybody has any information or knows anything, they're urged to call the West Palm Beach Police. Sergeant Dennis Hardiman is the lead on this case. His number is 561-822-1896. That's 561-822-1896. Or you can report information anonymously to Crime Stoppers of Palm Beach County. That number is 800-458-TIPS. That's 800-458-8477. You can also report tips to Crime Stoppers online at crimestopperspbc.com. Tips reported to Crime Stoppers that result in an arrest can lead to a cash reward for that tipster.
Mike, just based on your years of professional experience, the nature of this crime and how common it is in this area, it appears that somebody improperly disposed of a body.
We're not jumping to any conclusions or speculating as to anything at this point. What we have is we have human remains that appear to be that of an infant, and we need to determine who they belong to and what happened.
With it being in, I guess, a trash kind of area, does that like affect maybe like able to be able to identify like some of the parts just because it's not in a contaminated sort of area?
I'm not a scientific or DNA expert, but when you have human remains and you can extract DNA, then certainly that is a step that may help in the investigation into identifying who the remains belong to.
One thing that we can clearly identify is that this infant is a victim. Your feelings on that, just the nature of the age of the individual involved?
Regardless of age, when we find human remains that were discarded in the garbage, we don't know how they got there. We need to determine how they got there and where they came from. So we're not going to speculate on anything. We're going to do a thorough investigation and use all the resources that we have available to proceed with the case.
What kind of information are you looking for from the public?
Well, certainly anybody that knows anything, if somebody knows somebody that might have an infant one day and not have an infant another day, certainly that could be something of aid to the investigation. So anybody with any information. Detectives are working this case. They're going through the surveillance video. They're going to track movement of the truck's routes. This was at an indoor facility where the garbage trucks come in and they dump their loads onto the tipping floor, and that goes through the renewable energy process. That's not my wheelhouse, but this was an indoor facility versus had this been in a landfill or somewhere where we might not have ever recovered them. You know, there are a number of what-ifs, but we're not going to hypothesize. What we're going to do is base our investigation on the facts, and those facts are that there were human remains that were recovered, believed to be that of an infant, at this trash plant Monday night. So we're in the very early stages of an investigation, and we will certainly keep you posted if we get any other information.
No matter what you're classifying the investigation, your message to the person or persons responsible for the placement of that body?
Well, the message is we want to know who the remains belong to and how they got there. That's the message. We're not going to assume or presume anything at this point.